Ever wondered what turns a plain, kind of boring list of text into a beautiful, engaging website? Well, the secret ingredient is a language called CSS. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works and what makes it so incredibly powerful.
I mean, just look at this. On the left, you've got your plain HTML. It's the skeleton, right? It's the raw structure. All the information is there. But on the right, that's what happens when CSS gets involved. It adds the style, the personality, the magic. This transformation is exactly what we're going to break down, piece by piece. So here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with what CSS actually is. Then we'll dive into the super important rules of the Cascade. After that, we'll get our hands dirty with the core building blocks, talk about modern page layout, and then we'll bring it all to life with a real-world example. Ready? Let's do it! All right, let's start at the very beginning. What in the world is CSS? Okay, so CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like this. If HTML builds the house, it puts up the walls, the doors, the windows, then CSS is the interior designer. It's the one that comes in to paint the walls, pick out the cool furniture, and arrange everything so it looks absolutely amazing. It's all about the look and feel. Now, you've got a few ways to get these styles onto your page. You can put them inline, which is right inside an HTML tag. You could group them internally at the top of your file, but really the gold standard, the way you'll almost always want to do it, is using an external style sheet. And why is that? Well, it keeps your structure totally separate from your style, which makes your code so much cleaner, way easier to manage, and you can reuse those styles across your entire website. It's a no-brainer.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial concept. What happens when you have two different styles trying to change the exact same thing? That's where the C in CSS, cascading, comes into play. It's just a fancy word for a set of rules the browser uses to figure out which style wins the fight.
Think of it like a ladder of importance. At the very bottom, you've got the browser's own default styles, like how links are blue and underlined. Your external and internal style sheets come next. But climbing higher, those inline styles, the ones you write right into the HTML, they'll beat the others. And then, way at the top, you have the nuclear option, @important. It crushes everything else. But you have to be super careful with it, because using it too much can make your code a nightmare to fix later on. And here's a perfect example of what I mean. That inline style is like a trump card. Even if your main style sheet says every single paragraph should be blue, the second you add style equals color red directly into that HTML tag, it's going to be red. End of story. It's the most specific instruction, so the browser listens to it over everything else. Okay, so we get the rules. Now let's talk about the actual tools you'll be using day to day. To write any CSS, you really need to master two key ideas: selectors, which tell CSS who to style, and the box model, which defines where that style actually goes. First up, selectors. These are just the patterns you use to tell the browser which HTML elements you want to change. The most basic one is the element selector. If you write a rule for P, like you see here, it's going to grab every single paragraph on your page and make them all purple. It's a broad brush, but it's great for setting up your base styles.
But what if you don't want every paragraph to look the same? That's where classes are just fantastic. You can give a special class, let's say title, to a few elements in your HTML. Then, in your CSS, you use a dot before the name to target only those elements. This gives you laser-focused control, and honestly, it's the most common and flexible way to apply styles.
And then you've got the ID selector, which you mark with a hash symbol. Now, the big rule with an ID is that it has to be totally unique on the page. You should only ever have one element with the ID of main. Think of it like a person's name versus a category. An ID is for one very specific, one-of-a-kind thing. Now for a concept that is the absolute key to understanding all web layout, the box model. To a web browser, literally everything, a paragraph, an image, a button, you name it, is a rectangular box. Seriously, if you can understand and control this box, you can put anything on your page exactly where you want it. And every one of these boxes has 4 layers. Let's build it from the inside out. At the very center, you have your content, your text, your image. Wrapped around that is padding, which is like some internal breathing room for the content. Then you have the border, which is the actual line you might see. And finally, on the very outside is the margin, which is the space that pushes other elements away. Say it with me: content, padding, border, margin. Get that down, and you've unlocked web layout.
So, speaking of layout, modern CSS has given us some incredibly powerful tools for arranging all those boxes. We're going to look at the two heavyweights, Flexbox and Grid.
And you know what? The difference between them is actually beautifully simple. You use Flexbox when you're arranging things in a single direction, either a row or a column. A navigation menu is a perfect example. You use CSS Grid when you need to arrange things in 2 dimensions, so rows and columns at the same time. Think of a photo gallery or the entire layout of a complex website. So 1 dimension, Flexbox. 2 dimensions, Grid. It's that easy.
Of course, great websites aren't just static anymore. They move, they react to you, and they have to look good on any device. And yep, CSS handles all of that too.
You ever hover your mouse over a button and see it smoothly fade to another color? That's a CSS transition. Instead of a sudden, jarring change, this transition property tells the browser, hey, animate this change over 0.3 seconds. It's such a small detail, but it makes a website feel so much more polished and professional.
And what about making your website look great on a phone versus a giant desktop monitor? That's where media queries come in. This rule is basically you telling the browser, hey, just so you know, if the screen is 600 pixels wide or less, I want you to apply these special styles. This is the core of what we call responsive design, and it lets you create totally different layouts for every device out there.
Phew, okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Theory is great, but now let's put it all together and see how these concepts actually combine to create a real component you might see on a website. So, take a look at this finished card. It's got a background color, those nice rounded corners, a subtle shadow, and even a little interactive effect. It might look complex, but I promise you, it's just a combination of the simple rules we've just learned. So, let's deconstruct it. How do we get from a few lines of code to this?
All right, step 1 is styling the main card itself. We give it a white background, we use border radius to get those soft, rounded corners, we set a fixed width so it doesn't stretch everywhere, and then we add a subtle box shadow which gives it that 3D effect and makes it feel like it's lifting off the page. See, these are just basic properties being applied to the box that is our card.
Next up, that little interactive flair. We use what's called a hover pseudo-class, which basically says, hey, when the mouse is over this card, I want you to apply this special style. The style we're applying is a transform that scales the card up just a tiny bit, and just like we saw a minute ago, we add that transition property to make the growth happen smoothly over 0.3 seconds instead of just popping abruptly. And just like that, there you have it. We've gone from the plain skeleton of HTML to a fully styled interactive component. We've seen how selectors target elements, how the box model defines their space and shape, and how transitions can really bring them to life. You now have the fundamental building blocks of web design. So the only real question left is, what are you going to design first?